You can't replace part of the brain. Like,
You treat them the same.
Source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the puppets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the $90 billion company. They had help up high, a lot of things.
State of Medtech with your host, Omar M. Khatib.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Really excited about today's guest because in this industry, there's some names that I've heard quite often. Dr. Josh Makower is one of those people. We've had so many mutual friends, and it felt like it took way too long for this to happen. But finally got on the show. Josh, thank you so much for joining us. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for inviting me, Omar.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited about today's topic. For the audience who does not know you, one of the things that's I think most notable is that you're a physician, you're a scientist, you're an inventor, serial entrepreneur, and investor. But if you can spend a few minutes kind of giving us a little bit of your background and everything. Yeah. I think the one thing that a lot of people who watch the show know you for is that you were the founder of NeoTract, which got acquired by Teleflix for I think about $1.1 billion. Huge exit. Really did it. More importantly, saved a lot of patients. But
Thanks.
Maybe give us a little bit of a background on you before we dive into today's topic about like reimbursement and why it's so important that it needs to be reformed.
Yeah, sure. Well, I've dedicated my life to trying to improve the lives of patients here on the planet here. I think the pieces that I've tried to drive are ways that technology can improve people's lives and to pay attention to not only the projects that I'm working on to accomplish those goals, but also to help others. And the two ways that I do that, I'm the co-founder of Stanford Biodesign, which is a program that I run currently here at Stanford University. It's the Stanford Musalam Center for Biodesign that I run. And we train hundreds of people a year here. And we work collaboratively and have inspired over 50 programs across the world that are using our textbook and using the same methodologies with the goal of giving people a successful process that they can innovate with. And that's what biodesign is. Also, I've taken an active role in advocating and really working on behalf of patients and behalf of the industry to try to make the ecosystem better so that patients can gain access to the latest and greatest technologies that would improve their health and that we can keep the ecosystem that produces those healthy. And I've done that, as an individual in some respects. And also we've started a policy program here at Biodesign that plays a role in bringing data and also educating people. And we're not lobbyists, but we're trying to create data that enlightens policymakers so that they can make the right decisions on behalf of their constituents and patients overall. So those are the various dimensions, and as an entrepreneur, as you mentioned, I've got NeoTract, but I've really started probably over a dozen companies in a variety of fields. And all of that really with the same focus is to use technology to improve people's health and try to create self-sustaining businesses that have the capacity to provide those solutions in the long term.
I love it. And something I gotta point out, you correct me if I'm looking at this the wrong way, but I feel like there's some people, specifically entrepreneurs, that they have something within them that they just cannot help themselves. So, love him or hate him, Elon Musk is one of those people in the sense that the guy had 5 or 6 companies already. And he said, yeah, I just want to throw Twitter on top of that. The guy can't help himself. And I think in a similar way, you're kind of similar in the sense that when I looked at your background, I think around 2013, 2014, you founded a company called MoxyMed, which is in the orthopedic space. And a year or two later, you founded a women's health company called Willow. And when I see that, I just feel like this guy can't help himself except for seeing things that are wrong in the world and figuring out a better way to help patients. I'm really, somebody with your talent and your experience, you could be literally in any industry you want. And so I'm very grateful that somebody like you continues to serve, communities, serve patients, and, make the world a better place. So really appreciate that.
Trying to do. Thanks, Omar.
Yeah. No, totally. Well, it is hard, man. It is hard. I'll quote Jay Watkins from Sonder, who said, we talked about Medtech investing. He's like, yeah, it's just really, really hard. He's like, but I love it, So on the hard topics, let's talk about why reimbursement is so important, why we have to reform it. And just to kind of set the stage for the audience, I want you to imagine that you're going to go into business. And I'm like, hey, look, to go into this business, you're going to go through 4 years of college, then you go through 4 years of a graduate school level training. You're going to go into debt. After you get out of that 4 years, you're going to spend anywhere from 3 to 8, maybe 10 years training. You're going to be worked like a dog, 80, 100-hour weeks. You're going to get paid less than a teacher. Once you get out of that, though, you're going to start working. And oh, by the way, you have no control of your pricing. And every year, the people who pay you are going to find ways to pay you less, and they're going to win. Nobody would go into that business, but that's essentially medicine. Quick commercial break, everybody. And breaking news, I'm headed to New York City this May to give a keynote at MD&M East. That's the East Coast hub for medical device advanced and critical manufacturing excellence. This is going to be an amazing event from May 20th to the 22nd. I'm going to give you little details on the keynote I'm delivering, but let me tell you a little bit about this event, why it's going to be so unique. First of all, it's being hosted at the legendary Chavez Center in Manhattan. This is where 60,000 plus medtech professionals, top tier engineers, global decision makers, they're all going to converge together to build the future. If you're in medical devices, this is our industry's Super Bowl. And even though we just started May, there's still time for you if you want to exhibit at this event. I highly recommend it. Look at it like this, okay? The headquarters of 11 of the world's 20th largest companies in our industry, they're in New York, okay? There's over $500 million in medtech venture capital investment in New York, and the manufacturing employment of about 60,000 medical device professionals in New York. Not to mention the fact that this is a global conference. I, for one, have confirmed there are people in my network who are founders, CEOs from Europe and Asia attending this event. Now, real quick, let me tell you about my keynote and give you a special promo code that's going to get you in for free along with some other goodies. So I'll be talking on Wednesday, May 21st at 12:30 p.m. for a special keynote that I'm calling The Third Wave, the Future of Big Tech and Medtech. In it, I'm going to break down AI, big tech, and software, first thinking about transforming product development and R&D, but more importantly, this new partnership about the third wave of technology. This isn't just theory, it's a new playbook for medtech leaders to win. It's going to be such a good talk. I've been putting a lot of time and effort into it, and if you've been to any of my talks or seen me on YouTube, you know I'm pretty entertaining on stage. Now, to take advantage of this, you can either check the show notes below and click that link, or go to the website MDM, as in Medical Device Manufacturing East. That's MDMEast.com. Sign up, use the code OMAR25. This will get you a free expo pass and the opportunity to see my keynote. Plus, you're going to get a big discount on any workshops that you want to attend. Plus, if you're wanting to exhibit, I highly recommend you take advantage of it. I know they have a few exhibit spots left. Go ahead and go to mdmeast.com and reach out to them so that you can find a way to exhibit at this event. You don't want to miss it. I can't wait to be there. I'll see you all in New York City. And now let's get back to the show.
And that's why, at least in the medical device industry and probably many of the other health technology related industries, biotech, you find people that are so passionate about what they're doing that those substantial hurdles do not prevent them from proceeding. And that's, sort of why we keep on coming back, because ultimately we're driven by the mission of trying to improve people's lives, and that is worth it. It's worth the sacrifice, it's worth the risk, and that is what brings us back. So, Elon, I don't know if he's focused on patients. I don't think he is, but we are in this industry. That's the only way you win, is with good patient outcomes. There's no other way. And, the only way you win is to actually improve the quality of care, the quality of life of people. So that's the ultimate deliverable, and that's what we are seeking. There's no other reason to do this work. At the front end of that is, or I'd say to the back end of it, after all that risk in terms of identifying an idea and creating something, then testing it and evaluating it so that it's sufficiently safe and effective by the FDA, finally to get authorization. And then you begin the process of reimbursement. And where I tend to go, in a prioritized way, is after what is the biggest problem that needs to be solved, and sort of focus there. There are lots of places we could focus, but, back in the, I'd say, when was the time frame? It was probably in the 2008 to 2012 area. I really focused on regulatory affairs, because at that time, the FDA really needed serious reform, and it was impacting innovation in the United States. U.S. competitiveness. It was impacting the industry in terms of its ability to continue to deliver, important therapies for patients. And you could see the ecosystem dying. And I invested myself substantially with a bunch of others, it wasn't just me, in trying to create data that would shape the story about what was going on. And then subsequently through, direct personal advocacy on behalf of the industry, and tried to, work together with folks on both sides of the aisle to drive what ultimately became the Food and Drug Administration Safety Act that was signed into law by President Obama and now is the current prevailing law governing FDA. And it's been, I would say, a success. The advancements in therapies, the improvement in care, many of the things that are now, really driving so many great outcomes for patients would not have been possible probably if that had not been passed at that time. But we did sustain some serious damage, and I don't think really we've all fully recovered from those. And the same thing is now about to happen, is happening with reimbursement in this country. And the system as a whole needs a relook. And within that system, there's a few particular points that are so problematic that, we can focus. You could look at it holistically and be overwhelmed. And certainly there's a reason to be overwhelmed. It's a complicated system and many, many things could be changed. But, as I've learned, you cannot fight a battle on a million fronts. You must focus. And so, I've focused my efforts on two things. One is to try to find ways of getting adoption around this accelerated coverage for things that really make a difference in patients' lives. You could call those breakthroughs. And then the other thing I'm focused on is trying to fix a significant problem in the coding framework. And just to describe I know many of the listeners here probably don't understand any of these terms, but I'll just say, like, when you're a patient and you need a therapy, and that therapy is available to you so that you can go get it, your insurance company will pay for it so that you can get a therapy. That is patient access. Okay? That is what is needed for you to walk in, be a candidate, and be offered a therapy. That moment that meets is patient access. Behind that, there's a ton of things that need to happen. Within the, let's say, system, there's what we would call reimbursement, which means that all the people that do the work, build the product, do the care, that's physicians and nurses, and the hospital and or healthcare system that provides it, get paid for delivering that therapy to you. And that is what's generally, sort of reimbursement. They expend those services or products or what have you. They get paid for those. And that's, how the economy works around delivering care for patients. There's a lot of other things that go into it. Obviously, for that physician to know how to do this procedure, they need to be trained. Usually the companies make that investment. There needs to be data. Usually the companies are making that investment. There's a lot that goes into that moment. But at the end of the day, sort of the last stop is reimbursement so that you can get access. Okay. And if we back out from that, what is required for reimbursement to happen in our existing system? You need to have a code worthy of reimbursement. Okay. I mean, that literally is a number. It literally is a letters and number thing. But unless you have it, it's like, sort of wanting to either pay or be reimbursed for your taxes without a social security number. You need a social security number, to be in the system. You can't be in the system unless you get a code. And there's different levels of codes. Some that have, let's say, more value in terms of generating, sort of the system, getting the system to work, and other codes that are sort of like not as valuable in terms of getting the system to work and are more, let's say, tracking codes or things like that. So you can get a code. You need what's called a category 1 code to really secure reimbursement. There's another type of code, let's call a category 3, that is generally referred to as a tracking code. That doesn't mean that does not a high qualifier for getting reimbursement. You can get reimbursed under a Category 3, but it is not a guarantee. It is not nearly as strong a statement about the support of the society generate. But they're saying like, "Hey, we'll give this to you, but then we'll see." That's sort of a little bit of the way it is. Some specialties and some fields, it is good enough. Many, it is not. So it's really varies by specialty. So that's coding. As I mentioned, there's 3 legs of the stool: coding, coverage, payment. So we just talked about coding. Now let's talk about coverage. Obviously, you could have a code, but if your insurer says, "Hey, we don't cover that," you're out of luck. That decision is made by the payer. Could be CMS, could be a private company, right? They have to decide whether they're going to pay or not. The process by which they go about deciding that today is not as transparent or predictable as we would like. We would love to be like the way we work with FDA, where we establish what the parameters are for safety and efficacy. Those get built into a trial with statistical significance, and then you run the trial and know at the end of the trial whether you won. And if you didn't win, you don't get approval.
Let me ask you this sort of controversial question. Do you feel like it's not a transparent process and that does not exist because most of these payers are publicly traded companies with fiduciary responsibilities to make more money and or not lose money?
I think there's definitely economic pressures from all the payers that do play a role. So I don't want to impugn anybody's motivations. I'm going to more focus on the system and what's not working, because I really don't know. I mean, I'm not sitting in those rooms. What I can tell you is that it is exceptionally difficult to navigate this when you do not know what the real box is that needs to be checked. And, I have been in situations where we have what I would think of is more than substantial evidence to generate what should be a payment or a coverage, and being told you don't have enough evidence,
Yeah.
And
that can kill your company overnight too.
And so it's more like, okay, well, what is required? That is not clear. And so there isn't a clear target, and therefore there's no predictability. With FDA, by the way, this is what was fixed back in that law, back in 2012 when it was signed into law. We need to be clear about what these milestones are. The communication needs to be transparent and predictable. And as a result, the industry has risen to the challenge. I mean, if the bar is here, good to know before you set on the journey.
What was it like before 2008, before that law was passed?
So look, since I think it's 1976, the FDA really started regulating devices more closely. And in that time frame, a lot of sort of rules were established. And it was, let's say a lot more, I would say it was a lot looser or a lot easier because, there was, sort of reasonable interpretation of those rules. And for the most part, I would say regulation was sort of being administered on a reasonable level for the most part. Over time, we continue to add more and more restrictions and structure around it for good and bad reasons, but it has happened. And so further iterations and modifications, etc. What happened dramatically in 2008 was a new administration came in, happened to be the Obama administration, also ushered in a wave of people in power who really believed industry was evil. And look, there are always bad actors everywhere in any industry. And they should be isolated. They should be identified. They should be, within the realm of capability. They should be, punished for bad behaviors. Those things, but it should not indict the whole industry, because in fact, the majority of actors are good, and there are already existing means to go after bad actors. So We already have those tools and we can use them. I certainly think that they're available, and that sort of doesn't mean that we need to make it harder for all of the vast majority of good actors to sort of deliver their goods and services to patients. So we need to be thoughtful about it and balanced, and not declare an entire group is problematic because of one or two instances. Similar things happen in Europe, by the way, because of literally one substantially egregious situation with one manufacturer. The entire European regulation of medical devices has clamped down, destroying innovation in Europe. I mean, it is
Yeah.
unbelievable what has happened there, and that's not the right reaction. And in fact, case in point with, like, let's say a Theranos, if someone is going to be lying, that is wrong. And if the regulators are asking the right questions and they're being lied to, that is wrong. And there are legal means to go after people who do that. If that happens, those tools exist. It's not an indictment on the system of regulation. Thankfully, those situations usually result in the bad actors, being punished, and they should be. But in the case of the vast majority of us in the industry, we're not, we shouldn't be punished because of the one or two, right? So I think, moving more broadly here, back to the reimbursement topic, when it comes down to reimbursement, coding is a challenge. I can go into some of the details there. Coverage is a challenge because it needs to be clear. And I really believe that patients and all the participants would benefit from an incredibly transparent, clear process that is not as difficult to navigate. If you're a patient and you have to go through a thing called prior authorization for something that you need, and you have a denial, which is probably the majority of these, you get denied. And many patients just said, "Oh, I was denied," and then they give up. Well, that's the idea. They're sort of hoping you give up, because but it doesn't mean that you don't deserve or need that therapy. It just means that there's a barrier there, and they're trying to create a sort of a spigot on access to technologies. Many of these can ultimately be overturned on the basis of clinical evidence and the need of the patient, if the patient and the physician are persistent enough to take it what ultimately might be to a legal hearing. Most patients, are going to say, well, you know what, it's too much of a hassle. They're sort of counting on that. Every time someone gives up on something that they actually need and that they could reasonably qualify to get through one of these processes, they're reinforcing the system that is actually set up to sort of prevent them from gaining access.
Do you feel like that's also, I mean, in this strange way? So, like, looking from the point of view of the payers, like, okay, they don't want you to move forward because they have to pay money for that, and so that kicks the can down the road, and then the patient ends up in some cases getting worse, getting sick, and now they do qualify to get certain care because it's gotten so bad, and then the payer ends up paying more money. They just pay more money later on.
I agree. I mean,
is that a simplification of the situation, do you think, or?
No, it does happen. I do think that many of the therapies that we're trying to advocate for, that are clearly beneficial, but there is a very, very slow adoption of these for multiple reasons. Some of them are clinically reasonable, and some of them are not. And I don't think that this is serving patients well. I actually don't think it's serving the insurance companies that well. I think that it's generating more cost, more risk, and throttling innovation. I think that the whole thing needs a relook. And where I'm focused on two things. The first is we're down to one last issue, I think, really, with the coding process with respect to obtaining a Cat 1 code, which is the highest level code. and it has to do with this thing called widespread use. Believe it or not, you can't get a Cat 1 code. One of the criteria of getting a Cat 1 code with the American Medical Association is that you need to have widespread use. By the way, widespread use has no clear definition. What is widespread use? Well, it probably means a lot of people are doing it, or enough people are doing it. What's enough? Why is this a criteria to get a code? I'm not sure. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me if it's clinically validated through clinical trials, and you have a decent number of physicians capable of filling out the RUC survey, which is sort of a requirement before you can even get a payment assigned. If you have enough of that, that seems like a reasonable number to justify a code. I mean, by the way, this isn't the last gate. There's many gates after this that will gate whether patients get access to things. We just talked about them. Coverage and payment, and physician adoption. Whether it works or not is up in the physician's hands. And physicians don't just adopt things willy-nilly. They want to see what works in their patients. So there's many, many other regulators downstream. This is just one right at the front of the process that doesn't make sense. By the way, if you don't have a Cat 1 code, high probability you're not going to get paid, which means that it's going to not be adopted that much, which means that you're not going to have much widespread use, which means that you're not going to be able to code to verify that you can get widespread use. So this is a catch-22 situation that is a bottleneck that doesn't make sense to me. And I brought this up. We've written papers about it here at Stanford about how this is impacting the innovation ecosystem. This one doesn't make sense to me. It does not. A code is simply a descriptor of a thing. Why do we need to set a widespread use in front of it? I could say, okay, reasonable. Enough physicians should be doing it so they can properly value it. That's a reasonable statement. That number is known. It's certainly less than 50. So that's a nice, clear goal. Have that many physicians doing it so we can value it properly. Absolutely reasonable. Beyond that, I don't understand why. It doesn't make sense to me.
So, can you think of any? Because it's. I mean that one thing among many things that we talked about, like can kill company. Can you think of any examples of companies with like great technologies that just ended up not making it because of what you just described?
Everybody, quick break. If you're a Medtech CEO or a product leader, you're going to want to listen to this sound. I want you to imagine you're about to have a product launch. You've poured your time, your budget, your reputation into a device you're about to launch. And after all of that effort, your FDA submission, gets rejected because of cybersecurity. This sounds dramatic, but it's actually not. It happens all the time to medtech companies, especially recently with everything being digitized. This happens so often because medtech companies treat cybersecurity as a checkbox when it's now a non-negotiable design pillar. The FDA's 2023 guidance didn't suggest cybersecurity, it demanded it. So if you're not ready with threat modeling, penetration testing, SBOM management, incident response, and airtight documentation, you're not launching, period. And here's what most entrepreneurs don't realize. Scrambling to fix these issues last minute can cost over $250,000 and delay your launch by months, which imagine the investment of getting delayed, right? The more you spend time in review limbo with the FDA is lost revenue, lost market share, and lost investor confidence. And yet, so many founders and entrepreneurs I talk to, they still treat cybersecurity as a postscript instead of a strategic advantage. Now, I've held off bringing this to my audience as a topic until now because there just wasn't a medtech-focused cybersecurity firm that I trusted, and that changed when I found Blue Goat Cyber. They specialize exclusively in medtech cybersecurity. They've helped companies like bioMaru, Inogen, Natera, along with nimble startups to get to market faster with a 100% FDA success rate. I had the chance to meet the founder, Christian Espinosa, and his story really resonated with me. So after he sold his first cybersecurity company, Alpine Security, Christian actually faced a personal health crisis. He ended up in the hospital, and that moment
made him realize how vital and vulnerable medical devices really are, because a medical device saved his life. So he built Blue Goat to serve medtech CEOs and founders just like you. Whether you're pre-revenue or scaling fast, Blue Goat can offer fixed-free pricing, unlimited retests, and no surprises. This isn't bolt-on security. This is built in from day one. You wouldn't launch a device that hasn't been clinically validated, so why would you risk launching one that's vulnerable to attack? Blue Goat will secure your device, simplify your submission, accelerate your approval, and they'll do it in a way that fits your budget, your timeline, and your team. So here's what I want you to do next. Go to bluegoatcyber.com, schedule a discovery call. They do these amazing calls. They'll do an analysis with you, educate you more, because the cost of waiting could be everything that you've worked for. So that being said, go to bluegoatcyber.com and schedule that call now. Let's get back to the episode.
I mean, there are examples. Well, I can say that there are good examples of companies that have failed here. I think rather than call out specific companies in particular, because some of them are in various states of failing, and I don't want to talk about any specific ones on this podcast, but there are also many examples of companies that had to go through extremely multi-year processes, draining the opportunity from their funders, and in fact being completely recapped, wiping out all the investors and institutions that back them. And it's interesting. People say, well, why should we care about venture people, whether they make money? Well, guess what? If you have a pension fund, if your savings as a hard worker are put into some instrument, you want the market to work for you. You want your savings to grow. This is a part of your ecosystem too. It isn't just, venture capitalists. They're working as a part of the ecosystem. These big pension funds have a portion of their assets dedicated there because generally they're hoping that we'll get more returns than they can just get by buying bonds. Okay. So everything is connected. Okay. And if we can make it efficient, transparent, predictable, we're going to have more efficiency and it's going to work for everybody. So we all do own a piece of this. Look, it's on the manufacturers. It's manufacturer's responsibility to do the right clinical studies, to honestly report their findings, to navigate this space with care, because people's lives and health are involved, and that's an important standard. But there's no really reason to make it more difficult to navigate. I think that AMA, in my opinion, should be allocating codes to things that are differentiable and describable, and they already have a very high evidence standard. There's a substantial clinical evidence standard before you get a Cat 1. That is a reasonable criteria that preserves the integrity of the code. This widespread use requirement is a chicken and egg thing that is a barrier that I just don't think makes any sense, and that's the one that we're targeting that needs reform, in my view. I think when that gets solved, we will then have a truly predictable process for establishing codes. Create enough clinical evidence. It's clear the criteria are clear about what that clinical evidence is. Achieve that, and then you get a code. And I think that that's the right framework. And have physicians look over that evidence and make sure that it's sufficient. That's okay too. But to set some of this as a hurdle to getting codes, and that's at the beginning of the process. So let's assume we solve that problem. Then we move on to coverage. And really the question is, how do we get at coverage? And you're right that private insurers are private companies. They absolutely deserve, and the system as it exists today, they're private companies. Like every private company, they're looking at profits and growth, and they have public shareholders that expect that, right? So they have to drive efficiencies. They have to drive for, income and revenue growth, and that's how they get their stock to be valuable. I mean, you won't have valuable stock if you don't have growth. It's just sort of the way the economics work. And unfortunately, the prevailing mindset, I think, and this might be unfair, but I think it is because of that framework. It is primarily that is the primary framework, and the view of technologies, new technology in particular, is very skeptical. New procedures, new technologies are viewed very skeptically, as if they're all going to drive up costs, and therefore, generally, unless there's a clear cost savings, the answer is no. And the reality is that while these technologies, many of them will deliver cost savings, in the beginning, when it's less efficient, they don't necessarily. Not all. Some do immediately. Others are a better clinical outcome immediately, and that's sort of the business that they're in. So I wish that there was, again, a more transparent threshold or framework around what the requirements are to be able to obtain coverage, at the private insurance level, and to a certain extent, even to the definition of what reasonable and necessary is for CMS, so that manufacturers and innovators can know what they need to hit. How wonderful would it be if, just like FDA, these parties, both public and private, would say, like, look, we want to see at least this sort of outcome in this patient population. And, CMS is not allowed to consider cost, but it could be, overall cost savings of this on the, for the private insurers, and many companies would be willing to step up and do that economic study to be able to win that case. Right now, it's completely opaque. So it is a guessing game, and it's very challenging.
Let me ask you this. So we, at the time of us recording this, we were recording this on Wednesday, October 30th. So we're exactly 1 week out from knowing who the next president and administration is going to be. So regardless of who that is, election happens. We get a new, we get a new president and administration. They call you up and say, Dr. Makower, we would like your help to reform reimbursement. I love what you said earlier about, like, you can't win multiple battles on different fronts. You have to have focus, right?
Yeah.
Where do you focus first, and why? Like, those three areas of the stool, which is coding, coverage, and payment. Where do you start out first? Like, what's the first big domino that you think that will take care of everything else?
Well, yeah.
And imagine, let's pretend that you have a magic wand, and I say, like, hey, like, it's gonna be hard, but this one domino you picked, it'll get fixed. Which one do you pick, and why?
Okay. So first of all, within the domain of the government can change its mind about whether American Medical Association should be the decider of codes on behalf of the country. They can make a decision there.
Can I ask you a question on that? Do you think, and you can hard pass on this because it's,
Yeah.
Do you think they should be? Because at least from my last check, the AMA, and I even remember this myself as a medical student and my father being a surgeon,
Yeah.
AMA represents like 10 to 15%, like 10, or I'm sorry, not represent, 10 to 15% of physicians in the United States are actually members of the AMA. That's down from, I think, back in the 50s and 60s when it was like 70 or 80%. So, like, something isn't working. Do you think that needs to change?
Well, I don't know. I mean, those are big questions that are. My feeling is that I do think that the membership question is like, yeah, I think that's a different issue. There's a lot of other things involved there. I certainly there's a lot that the AMA does that is good, and in fact, for the most part, when this system is working, it's good. It's just, and there's been a lot of improvements, by the way, in the AMA CPT process that are good. So, this last issue is one last thread that I think needs fixing, and I think it will, at least with respect to this framework. I think the rest of it, for the most part, there's puts and takes, but it's a system that can work for innovation, and I'm always focused on innovation. So I'm not ready to. I just think we just need to work together to get a system that is transparent, predictable, and that allows small innovators to be able to bring important innovations that could be beneficial to patients.
Completely agree.
Share that mantra and hold hands on that and get change there. But that's outside of anything that the government really has something to do with. This is an independent, not-for-profit organization. I just hope that we can sort of establish this and make improvements there. And we continue that dialogue, and I'm hopeful that the dialogue results in a positive outcome. And I haven't given up, and I'm going to still express these views and elevate them and illustrate how it's impacting innovation. And that's the best I can do, is to sound the alarm and try to raise these issues, so that there's some enlightenment as the impact on the future of patient care, which is what I care about deeply, especially with respect to innovation.
And that transparency is specifically on the coding side or the coverage side?
Okay, they're different. And that's why I was saying AMA is, any administration is not going to have more authority of the AMA. It's another independent, not-for-profit organization. There is probably some level where they can express concerns, but I at the moment, I don't see that necessarily being at the front of the spear. However, CMS is a government agency, and they are the largest payer in the world. So what CMS doesn't matter, because I think if CMS decides to do something, it does put some pressure on private insurers to follow suit, because if they sort of set the standard, and if they're, if private insurers, deviate too much, and by the way, private insurers pretty much through a separate but controlled arm administer Medicare. So they're all attached to each other. So when Medicare sort of makes an important decision, it has ripples across the industry. So that there is a good reason to focus on Medicare. Now comes the complicated part, which is to accomplish some of the things that we really should be doing. Medicare probably needs more money. I know it's a big budget, but we need to be willing to say that it's worth it for our tax dollars to support our seniors. And so they probably need more money to do their jobs. We need to pay them right. We need to make sure that the tools are there, that that great people want to choose a career doing that, who have that vision. That's what we want, right? We don't want to strangle this agency. And we also need to frame up their statutory capabilities so that they can do what they need to do in service to the American public, in bringing the best care available for seniors over the age of 65. That's what Medicare can do. So it doesn't come for free. There needs to be people dedicated to this. There's people need to be paid fairly and competitively, and we need to value care for our seniors as something that's important. So, this walks across lines, both parties should get behind, and we should be willing to pay for it. It's important. The seniors need that support, and many of us that are working on technologies that really can be beneficial to seniors understand that they're only going to get access to this if Medicare pays for it, and it should be worth it. And we're going to all be in that boat someday. And many of our parents are there. Many of those of us that have grandparents are there. We love them. We want them to be in good health and enjoy their lives. And this is how we do it. And this is how a society takes care of its older people. So we just sort of need to, align on that. I think when we align on that, then many of these things are going to happen, and the resources will be there to allow the latest innovations to improve care of seniors. And when Medicare gets behind some of these programs, like accelerated coverage, and I would say that I want to give credit to the CAG group that introducing a thing called the transitional coverage for emerging technologies, an improvement over CED, but much more needs to be done, and that is in context, in some small part of legislation that's being discussed right now. And I'm now speaking as an individual, not speaking on behalf of my role at Stanford. There is a bill that's being considered by Congress right now, HR 1691, that does have some features of allowing for more resources to CMS to do this, and to allow breakthrough technologies within certain categories to get immediately covered after they are authorized by the FDA, which would expand access to patients. So there's value there. That's an opportunity that I hope that the government on both sides of the aisle supports ultimately, and makes it part of law, that will give the CMS the statutory authority to expand its role in accelerating coverage for seniors for technologies that fit the criteria. I mean, there's many more technologies outside of that criteria that deserve to be supported, but like my view is do what's possible, make progress, show it works, show that it actually saves money, show that it improves people's health, and maybe we can come at it again in a few years and say, hey, this was really working. Look at all the benefits that have accrued, and now maybe we should expand it, and maybe we should, try to see whether private insurers can follow suit, which is what I hope they do. So those are things that I think can happen. But it requires us to keep an open dialogue, try to move it forward in a bipartisan way, and in a clinically reasonable way, so that good technologies really help improve the lives of people that need it.
All right, everyone, quick commercial break. If you're a Medtech CEO/founder, or maybe you're a sales or marketing leader at a startup or a scale up, you're going to want to listen to this. Are you struggling to get in front of your ideal audience, whether that's investors or perhaps clinicians who want to adopt your product? Maybe you're getting ghosted. You send emails and messages and nothing comes back, nothing happens, right? Or worse, nobody knows who you are, right? In business, visibility is everything. And I always tell people, if you want to persuade before persuasion can happen, you have to learn how to get attention. So if your sales team is desperate for traction, clinicians don't know your name, investors have never heard of you, you're losing opportunities every day. And that needs to change now. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. That's where my company, Katib & Co. comes in. We don't just do marketing, we do growth. We figure out how to engineer markets by creating magnetic messaging that makes you impossible to ignore. And we build high impact strategies, of course, using social media, but other channels such as email, text, and others to help turn content and messaging into commercial pipeline, and it leads into closed deals. As an example, we worked with a surgical robotics company in raising a $31 million Series A, and then they needed help on their pre-market release. So we packed their CRM with 198 surgeon leads and nurtured them down. That ended up becoming 4 closed hospitals. 4 hospitals closed and adopted this technology within a period of 6 months, and they got 2 great key opinion leaders in the process. So whether you're a startup founder wearing too many hats, or maybe you have a marketing team that just spread too thin and they don't have the expertise, my team and I plug in and partner up with your company, and we amplify your reach. From crafting powerful sales scripts to optimizing your team's demo calls, creating content, having it go out on a consistent basis, we transform your outreach into a growth engine. So if you're ready to dominate your market, you're ready to become a no name and people to know of you and take your calls and take your meetings, I want you to act right now. Don't wait anymore, because you've already wasted plenty of time. Go to growmymedtech.com. That's growmymedtech.com. And I want you to schedule a quick call. My team and I will give you a free analysis with 2 to 3 actionable ideas. There's no strings attached. And if we're a fit, great. We can get partnered up and we can help you go to the next level. And if not, look, the ideas are always free. So do not wait and don't waste any more time. Go to growmymedtech.com right now, and let's make you the go-to name in your niche. Now, let's get back to the episode.
No, I completely agree. And I know we're running close to time, and we appreciate you spending some time with us. Got a couple more questions. I'm just wondering, again, maybe this is an oversimplification, but I look at a lot of the issues that we just laid out, like issues of persuasion, right? And so if we look at coding and figuring out coding with the AMA, and then coverage and transparency there, which one's more persuasive to the other? Like, is it more persuasive to have more transparency and better guidelines for coding that'll allow companies to leverage better and be more persuasive on the coverage side, or vice versa, or neither?
Well, they're both needed.
They're both needed.
Different actors involved. Okay. These are different. These are really administrated by somewhat. I mean, coverage and payment definitely falls within generally a single entity, but the coding part is almost like a separate vertical. It has a domain. So I truly believe in that consistency, predictability, transparency, those things create a healthy regulatory environment. And you can think of like reimbursement as a regulatory mechanism, right? Things that get paid go forward. Things that don't get paid don't go forward, right? So the question is, what's the secret open sesame code? If you say, here's what it is, you have to hit this bar. It's clear, you want what to do. Innovators that have the original idea that know they'll never hit that bar, they don't enter the market. They don't even try because you're never going to get there. What's challenging, though, is to have so much of our resources consumed into projects with the belief that they might, but they're actually going to be throttled by the time they get there. They just don't know how badly. So that's what we have today, and that's what we need to fix. And I think the good evidence is, if you look at what the transformation with FDA is from over the last 10, 14 years, 12 years, is that when there is a predictable and transparent and fair process, innovation is encouraged, new ideas come forward, innovators enter, dollars from private investors go into making these things happen, and the ecosystem can be healthy and patients can benefit. That's there. We just need to do something similar on the reimbursement side, and I think we'll as a society see those benefits, and I actually think economically we'll see those benefits as well. It's just that right now there's a lot of things that are broken, and as you try to put together a bicycle, you got to start somewhere. Let's put the wheel on, put that on. We can fix the chain next, and let's work through it in a thoughtful way. But let's try to hit the things that are like the biggest things first, and then we'll move on to the things that are down the list.
I love it. And, want to thank you for coming on the show for a little bit. We have a few minutes left. So as we kind of wrap up, I always like to do sometimes like rapid fire questions so you can answer these as quickly as you want. So do that. Again, definitely want to have you back. There's so many other topics we want to cover. So first question for you on the rapid fire is, you're a professor at Stanford, you're a serial entrepreneur. Continuing education is kind of like a hallmark of our space and industry. What are some books that have really influenced you that you feel like you gift to entrepreneurs most often?
So, little known fact, I'm partially dyslexic, so I don't read many books. I get a lot of my information. I mean, of course, I had to read books in medical school and in engineering school and all those schools, but it was a chore. I don't really read books for pleasure. I read for doing my job, and it takes me longer than most people to get through what would people can digest books like that. So I don't actually generally give books as a gift, which is a sad statement, but it's just how I've navigated personally. It's just a flaw of mine that it's just part of who I am. So I do a lot of reading, but I have to focus, and it takes me longer than most people to get through an article or a book.
What books have you read that sort of at least influenced the way you look at the world, operate, etc.? So I, like you, I myself am dyslexic, but I've sort of found a way to become more efficient at reading books. As you can tell here in my library.
Well, I mean, I appreciate the ideas that in many books. I mean, Good to Great. The chasm, crossing the chasm, the concept of that. I mean, I quote many of these many times, and quite honestly, probably did the clip notes on them, didn't read the actual book. But there's a lot of great ideas out there. There's a lot written about what motivates people, and how do you as a leader motivate people. And it's always about the mission more than it is about what you're going to get paid or what you're going to get returned. Like people need to be fairly compensated. But that's not what keeps them in their jobs. What keeps them in their jobs is the belief of a big mission vision that inspires them to stay where they are. That's really how you can draw the best talent to any project. So having a big vision and a big mission that really is meaningful, that people can feel like a part of something that's important. That's how you get those folks. It's not by saying we're going to pay you a lot of money.
I love it. Yeah,
make a lot of money ultimately.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah,
I'm definitely with you on that. Okay, so next one, you you're kind of a renaissance man. You have all these different things that you do professionally, but added to that, you're a musician. You got a band, Still Trust.
That's right.
You're a
Good.
guitarist. What's that?
Good research there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This is we have to know this, you know. So tough question. Maybe this is not a rapid fire one, but like we're gonna make it rapid fire. Greatest band of all time, or top 2 or 3, and then greatest guitar player.
Oh my God, guitar player! Wow.
Let's start with top bands. What are the greatest bands in history that come to mind?
I mean, I love the Beatles.
I'm with you. Okay, yeah, I'm completely agree with you on that. Completely agree with you on that. What about 90s onwards? Who comes to mind?
I mean, these days I'm really loving Coldplay. I think that they're super creative. I really like that music.
They've kind of like been around for a while. They've done well, like sticking around, right?
Yeah.
You know, they're still selling out concerts and everything.
I think that they have some of the biggest outcomes of all time at this moment. I think they're pretty close to the top, actually. But that's not why I like them. I really love the creativity and how the music makes you feel. You know, it's really touches me.
Yeah. Well, you can't leave without giving us a guitarist. So, like on the musician side, somebody who I just feel like is extremely talented was Dave Grohl, who was over at Nirvana and Foo Fighters. Like, he's the man. But greatest guitar player.
I mean, Hendrix probably redefined what a guitar is, I guess. You know, even Clapton, you know, would go to his concerts and be wowed. You know, Hendrix.
Didn't Clapton didn't Hendrix semi-force Clapton into retirement because Clapton was like, "Damn, this guy's really good."
Yeah, I know. You know, I've heard about and you know sort of seen those stories that he talks about that experience of seeing him play and being wowed. You know, I think he did sort of redefine, you know, what is to play that electric guitar. He really took it in a whole new place. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Josh, look, thank you so much for coming to the show. It's great to finally have you on. We're looking forward to having you on again in the future. And then for the most part, where can people find you online? No TikTok, I would imagine, but like I know you're active on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn is probably where to keep track of all the stuff that we're doing. And of course, biodesign.stanford.edu is our website for biodesign, you know, and that's the, you know, but LinkedIn, it'll track there, but biodesign site is also a great place to keep track of what we're up to.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Josh, for being on the show. This is another episode of State of Medtech. Be sure to give Josh a follow. Go check out Stanford Biodesign. And if you haven't already, we're the #1 show for a reason. Subscribe, give us 5 stars, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who would really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.